Okay, so I'm going to go over portable router safety now, and there's a couple components here. We have the base of the router, we have our handles right here, we have this adjustment that locks the base in place, pretty important, and then we have the motor assembly. It's basically like a drill, a really high powered drill motor. It goes at a lot higher RPMs, and these are pretty expensive. We don't want to drop them on the floor. They're about 4 times the price of a drill, and we want to be careful with them. Over here is our switch and our power cord. So we're always trying to be mindful of the power cord. We never want to bump the power cord and chew it up. And we have our spindle right here, and then our bit and our collet. So we have lots of different bits you can choose from, different designs, different things. A lot of times I recommend to kind of keep it simple, like a simple roundover. And that just helps reduce your sanding time. Nobody really likes to sand. If it's a simple roundover, it's a lot easier to sand. But if you're trying to get fancy, by all means, we'll use some different bits and you can stack up some different things. Changing the bits is very difficult for students. Your goal is just to hold the bottom part down, and I'll bring this a little closer so you can kind of see a little better. Our goal is just to hold the bottom of the spindle. So this first wrench, the only thing we're trying to do is hold that nut so it doesn't move. So a lot of students don't quite get that. They'll try to do other things. And then the top wrench up here, we're trying to turn that counterclockwise. So this top wrench, we're trying to turn it this way. So it gives me better leverage if I can position them this way, because then all I have to do is squeeze them together. So once I squeeze them together, I can unscrew the collet, and then I can select a different bit. So a lot of times you just spin it out like this, and here comes the bit. You might want to wear a pair of gloves. My hands are kind of calloused, but it might not be a bad idea. Please don't grab the bit with pliers or pry it out with a screwdriver. You're trying to insert this bit quite a ways, almost all the way. If you bottom it all the way out, sometimes it overheats, so you need just a little bit of room so the shavings can go through, but you want it in more than 1/2 inch for sure. So here's our 1/2 inch mark. We want it in a little bit more than that if we can. I have seen one router bit launch across the room. It just popped out and it flew way up in the air and it traveled a great distance. I never thought I'd see anything like that. And what happened is they had the bit out quite a ways. It was out like this, and they were doing an operation, and it shot across the room. Luckily it didn't hurt anybody, but we got to make sure the bit is all the way in. So we're going to put this back into the spindle. We're going to put our first wrench on the bottom again, and now we're just going to try to turn this the other direction. So I'm just going to try to rotate, pull these apart now. I'm trying to go counterclockwise or clockwise now to tighten it. So just remember, counterclockwise is going to loosen it, clockwise is going to tighten it. The bottom wrench we're just trying to keep the same. So now let's take a look at our board. You're always going to try to router end grain first. So here's my end grain. It's not a bad idea to router end grain first because it's going to split out a little bit, and then you can go and do the edge grain. So I do my end grain, then my edge grain, and then I can do my end grain and finish with my edge grain. So I can work my way around this board this way. The direction of feed is pretty important. It's on the outside of a board, it's going to be counterclockwise. If you're doing if you had a hole drilled in this, you would go clockwise. So that gets a little bit confusing. You just got to remember that you're trying to cut into these flat surfaces. So the bit's going to spin this way, where those flat surfaces are of the bit is where the cutting happens. So for example, this bit has a ball bearing on it. Most of our bits do, and that's going to ride across the board, and our goal is to go counterclockwise around the part. So our router base, let me show you this clamp a little better. That's what locks the base in. And if you're using a big bit especially, you might make more than one pass. So I would maybe just pull a little of the bit out, and then I would do my routering, and then I'd come back and I would adjust the bit to do my next cut. Okay? So if you have both hands on these handles when you're routering, there's no way you can really cut yourself other than putting it into your body, but that would be very unlikely. I don't know how that could happen really unless you're really being careless. All your clothes should be tucked in. You don't want any loose clothing or objects near the router while you're routering. So now I've had the router unplugged this whole time. So I'm going to plug it in, and I'm going to turn on my table. I really want you to use these tables for routing because that's what they're designed for, is for routing. Sometimes your board will stay steady. Other times you might have to take and clamp your board down to help keep it in position. So it's kind of up to you. If you feel like your board's not moving, see, I think this board's going to move a little bit. So I'm going to put one clamp over here, and I'm going to have to move that clamp as I go. So I have to pull my router away from the board when I start it. You don't want to have your board touching the router bit when you start it. So you want to have it away. And now I will have to reach up here to turn it on, but then my hand just goes straight to the handle. Set this away from me when I turn it off and wait for it to stop, and then I can reposition my board. Now I'm kind of over here, so I can start back up over here. And now I just have a little bit to go. Okay, it's really important that when you're using the router, if you set it up like this, you got to make sure that there's nobody around you and such. Otherwise, I'd probably prefer it down like this, and you kind of got to watch it because that bit does spin for a minute. One time we were doing some routering, we set it up like this, and for some reason I had a younger student try to touch this bearing while it was moving. And I guess I was on my game that day because I saw his hand was super close. He was just going right for it. And I reacted and I hit his hand away. And I hit him, but I did it very quickly. So there was some force. And he was, he's like, "You just hit me." And he was like, "Mr. Reiser, you just hit me." And he was pretty worked up. I'm like, "Man, I just saved your finger." I'm like, "Yeah, I had to bump you a little just so you didn't touch the bit." So remember, I mean, you can't put your hand near that even when it's slowing down. So keep that in mind. So the router is a great tool. It makes a lot of our projects better, and I encourage you to use it a lot. Do not be intimidated by it. Get some help. Let me train you some more on your different projects and different situations. Lots of people have these in their garages. You can find these at yard sales like crazy, and the reason why people buy them, they get intimidated by them, they don't understand how they work, and then they sell them for nothing. So I encourage you to find a good deal on your own router, and I'll teach you how to use it because you can do lots of really neat things with it. It's an exciting tool. It can do tons and tons of operations. So that is the portable handheld router. We're never going to clamp it in a vise and try to use it with like a router table. So you're never going to clamp a board like this or clamp the router in a vise to try to use it like this. Okay, you never do that. That would not be safe. You just use the router table.